Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please...
Recording in progress.
Thank you. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their phones, and if anybody still has a beeper, to please silence that original beeper. Thank you. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom and wish to testify, you must be visible to the court reporter to be sworn in. Otherwise, if you speak without being sworn in, your comments may not have evidentiary value. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of October 12, 2022 to order. The time is 6 o'clock. Jill, please call the roll.
Robert Behar.
Here.
Claudia Miró, she asked to be excused. Julio Gabriel.
Here.
Luis Revolta. Vinnie Torre.
Here.
Chip Withers.
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that the board is a quasi-judicial board which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communications and site visits, An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of a quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such visit. In either case, the board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and/or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any member of the board have such communication or site visit to disclose at this time?
No.
Swearing in. Everyone who speaks this evening must complete the roster on the podium. If you have not done so, we ask you to please go over to Jill and complete that. We ask that you print clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Now, with the exception of attorneys, all persons physically in the City Commission chambers who will speak on agenda items before us this evening, please rise to be sworn in. Thank you. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open your chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating that you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. The first, we have the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the September 14th, 2022? We have a motion to approve. We have a second by Julio. Any comments? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. The procedure that we'll use for tonight's meeting. First, we'll have the identification of agenda item by Mr. Caller, the presentation by the applicant or the applicant's agent, then the presentation by staff. Then we'll have an open public comment, first for in-chamber, then Zoom platform, and then phone line platform. Afterwards, I will go ahead and close for public comment. We'll have a board discussion and questions, and a motion and a discussion and a second of motion if it calls for. Then board's final comments and a vote. We are expecting one member to come in a little bit later. And if we start with the first two items, that board member will not be able to participate on the item we're on. So if it's okay with the rest of my board members, what I'd like to do is move the legislative items up first, which is item E4 and E5. Is everybody okay with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Let's go ahead, Mr. Caller, if you please read the first item, in this case would be E4 into the record.
Item E4, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code by amending Article 14 process, Section 14-102.3, meetings, quorum, required vote, to amend the requirement of 4 affirmative votes for recommendations relating to comprehensive plan amendments, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and effective date. Item E4, public hearing.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jennifer Garcia, City
evening.
Planner.
Before we continue, please let it be shown that we have Mr. Revuelta in the chamber with us. Go ahead, please.
So these two items should be fairly easy. The first item that you read into the record is just about clarifying comprehensive plan map amendments. In the past, I'm sure you remember, we've had to have a meeting again to confirm a recommendation to go to the commission. The state statute says you have to have a recommendation from the planning board, which is you. And so instead of having to bring the applicant back the next meeting and wasting the board's time, if they don't have a confirmed recommendation to go to the commission, it's an automatic denial recommendation to go to the commission. That's what the clarification in the code is.
Just to supplement that, since I was involved in that issue, if, for example, you have a 3-2 vote in favor of approving the comprehensive plan amendment, it will be deemed a denial. In other words, in order to have an approval of a comprehensive plan amendment, you have to have at least 4 votes. In the past, what happens is it would go without a recommendation, but state law says that there has to be a recommendation from this board. And so therefore, this solves that issue by simply saying, if you don't get 4 votes to approve the comp plan, it's deemed a denial, and it goes to the commission with whatever your vote is, and it's considered a denial, unless, of course, you have 4 affirmative votes for it. So it avoids the situation that we had.
Collier, so if we have a 3-2 vote and
Yes.
we move that to commission,
Right.
it's not going with an affirmative recommendation.
Right. The vote will reflect that there was a 3-2 vote to approve. However, the way the code will be now written is that a 3-2 vote is deemed to be a denial on a comprehensive plan. On all the other items you have, a 3-2 vote for approval would be deemed as not being a recommendation. That's how we have everything else.
So
But
legislative.
just because state law requires a recommendation from this board, this is the way to avoid that
But
problem.
it requires recommendation, but a 3-2 vote is a recommendation.
It is a recommendation, but it's not a sufficient recommendation for approving a comprehensive plan amendment approval.
And if we don't have,
Just like other items.
and if we don't have 4 votes, means that we can never be able to move that forward?
No, it goes forward, but
But
it
as
goes
a
forward
denial.
as a denial. That's correct.
Before we go ahead and speak, Jill,
Yeah.
do we have, go ahead.
I just want to say one other thing. If the board believes that it would be appropriate that an item to be deferred to the next meeting, if you feel that, and hopefully it's not something that's urgent, but if you always have the option to defer the comprehensive plan amendment to the next meeting, if you choose to do so. Obviously, there may be circumstances where a deferral would be difficult because of the circumstances, but that is an option that the board would always have.
And if the applicant chooses to go with a 3-2 vote, they're going forward with a denial recommendation.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Before we continue, Jill, do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak on this item?
Not on this item.
Anybody on Zoom
No,
and on the phone platform?
no.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close the floor for public comment. That's okay. Louis?
Is the genesis of this request coming from the city commission, the state law? I just want to know.
It's coming, the genesis is in part is the state law, because the state law requires this board, which acts as the local planning agency. You sit as the LPA, and you're required to make a recommendation. But under our rules, because there has to be a minimum of 4 votes to have a recommendation, the problem was we passed something without a recommendation, and state law requires a recommendation.
But a 4-1 is a recommendation.
4-1 is a recommendation. If you have 4 votes in favor of it, it's a recommendation.
And a 3-2 is not deemed to be a recommendation by the city of Coral Gables?
The city of Coral Gables doesn't, requires 4 votes of this board in order there to be a recommendation.
Majority
Are
plus
we
one,
voting
right.
on today, and I'm sorry for I was late, on whether to pass 3-2 being a denial versus 4-1, which is the current situation we're in?
No, all you're passing today is that we're correcting a problem of the comprehensive plan going to the commission without a recommendation. Under the state law, we can't do that.
And unless you get 4 votes, it's going without.
It's going
Oh, I understand
with
that.
a denial.
I understand that math. What I'm trying to say, who established the math that you need a super majority to approve rather than a simple majority of 3-2?
Well, that has been
That's
years.
with the state, correct?
No,
Or the county?
No, the city commission has determined that the board's vote requires a minimum 4 votes for any recommendation. Otherwise, it goes with no recommendation. The problem we have is unique to the comprehensive plan. You've had other items where you haven't been able to achieve a 4 vote, and that's gone without a recommendation. The problem is the comprehensive plan can't go under state law without a recommendation. So
That's why I'm
this
asking.
solves it because there is now a recommendation. 3-2 would be a recommendation for denial.
So the state, according to comprehensive plan, the state requires that.
The state requires that you make a recommendation.
That's where I continue to fail the mathematical logic here.
Right.
It's either a supermajority or 4-1 dictated by somebody, or a 3-2, a simple majority, which happens in a lot of municipalities. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to push you on this issue, but I don't know if the rest of you understand it. If you understand it, I'll just basically stay quiet and listen to explanations.
Vinny?
Yeah, I understand it. I think what it forces us to deliberate to a point where we know it's either A or B. There's not going to be any time where we are neutral towards the subject. It's always going to be, if we don't get the 4 votes, guys, it's going to go as a negative. And that's the debate we're going to have going forward. It
Unless,
forces that debate.
from what I hear, we
analyzing the
do have an
genesis.
option to make it a deferral.
Right.
Am I-
If at a particular meeting you feel that, well, if we had a deferral, we could gather sufficient votes, but of course, there's no guarantee at the next meeting.
You're
that
gonna
somebody
have
else
it.
not be there. So, and there are times where I believe the commission has been concerned about the Planning Advisory Board unduly deferring an item. So you have to take that into consideration as well.
I think the lower common denominator here is 3-2 a sufficient approval to the city, recommendation to the city commission, or do we need a supermajority? And I'm trying to establish, and I'm not clear, hopefully you guys are, what is the genesis that is forcing us to make this decision of 4-1 versus 3-2?
Vinny, are you done with?
Well, what I was going to say is that, the commission is weighing our vote and as to their vote or to their decision-making. So, when it gets to 3-2, I don't know if they really take in consideration the 3-2 as a close vote, we're going to vote, or if it's a 6-0,
Oh, they're really
obviously they would take that stronger position, right? So I just don't know how that starts to weigh in on these things become gray matter for the commission to interpret what we really want this to look like.
My concern is there may be a case where you don't achieve 4 votes. So you're going to send it back,
You have to force it,
denial.
otherwise it's going to be denial.
I think the issue is going to be, what if you don't have the members sitting on the dais to keep going other than, let's say you have 5 members, you have a quorum. That's an example.
I still would
You have
like
a
to know
question?
what is
Yes.
forcing us to make this decision.
So if I can answer that. In this unique case involving comprehensive plan, that's all we're talking about here. Because state law requires a recommendation, this is what's brought this about. On all the other items, you've had, not frequently, but you've had from time to time where you haven't achieved 4 votes and it went without a recommendation. It hasn't been a problem. And it's not a problem going forward. It is a problem with the comprehensive plan, and indeed, we had to bring back an item to get a vote. In the future, we won't have to bring back an item. You will have made a recommendation. It may not be the recommendation a particular person wants to make because they voted in favor of it, but you couldn't achieve 4 votes. So it's deemed it's deemed a denial. Now, that's not unusual. There are other bodies that have required extraordinary votes. For example, moving the urban development boundary, I believe for the county requires 9 votes, or if you don't get 9 votes, it's deemed a denial. So it's not unusual in other jurisdictions that you have a supermajority requirement in a particular case.
The supermajority, excuse me, Chip, I'll just shut up and let you go. But the supermajority of 4-1 is required by the city of Coral Gables, by the city commission on comprehensive plan issues.
No, the supermajority requirement is on all items that come before the Planning Advisory Board. If you have a approval of a site plan, that requires a minimum 4 votes. Otherwise, it goes without a recommendation. If you have a TDR, which is before you tonight, and you can only get 3 votes to approve the TDR transfer, then goes without a recommendation. The only time it ever goes with a negative recommendation is comp plan, and the reason is you have to make a recommendation on the comp plan. So that's why we have this unique rule for that particular circumstance.
And before a 3-2 was a positive recommendation.
No, before a 3-2 was no
recommendation.
I thought that's what we are voting on tonight.
Well,
We're voting on
The
tonight.
commission wants us to send it to them with a recommendation or a denial.
I understand
Right.
that, but
That's bottom
All
line.
right, Chip,
Chip, sorry.
go ahead, please.
So, is the reason for not having a full panel an adequate reason for a deferral?
It could be. An adequate reason is a reason that you all decide is appropriate.
Okay. So that's a legitimate.
But I will caution this, the commission is concerned about continuing deferrals where essentially
Understand.
an applicant is being denied the opportunity to have a hearing. And sometimes an applicant is entitled to a denial.
So if we decide to defer it, because there are not 2 board members here or 1 board member here, at the next meeting, does the entire issue have to be rediscussed for the benefit of that absentee?
Well, the way we've handled that is the transcript is prepared. The members that are not present are instructed to read the transcript. At the time of the meeting, I will ask the members of the board that were not present to affirm that they did review the transcript prior to the hearing, and it's not necessary to open the public hearing. However, the board can, at its discretion, decide to open the public hearing.
Got it. And the last question, or the second question, so if the vote is 3-2, the commission then sees it as a no vote or a non-moving it forward. I understand that. What votes at the city commission level require a supermajority? I know probably the sale of land, maybe 99-year leases, because there are some supermajority votes that the commission has to follow. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'd have to get back to you on that, and I will have that information to you at your next meeting. I'm not sure which votes on the commission require supermajority.
So there's a difference in that that's a vote that fails, whereas ours is a vote that goes forward with a negative recommendation.
Right.
Is there a difference than that between a denial and a negative recommendation?
No.
Okay.
So, if I may?
Okay.
I think I understand now. We had this come 2 months ago, and there was a little bit of a snafu here. In reality, that meeting, you should have said, no, you can't do that. You have to get a vote here today.
If I had
And
to
it
do
didn't
it-
happen.
if I had to
So
do
in
it
the
all over
future,
again, I
if
definitely
things
would have
stayed the
done
same,
that.
we would still be forced to get to a 4 vote.
Right.
Is that
Or-
correct?
or-
You make us get to a 4 vote, so we wouldn't have to go
Well,
back?
You may
Yes,
not,
but the board might say, well, I'm sorry, I feel strongly, I'm not going to change my vote. And, if it means going the way it goes, then that's the way it goes. I cannot force you
I understand.
to vote a certain way.
so if it would have been a 3-2 vote, it would be a denial according to the commission,
Automatically. no.
automatic denial.
So if we don't get a 4-2 vote here, we deny it going to the commission, this motion, right?
but only with respect to comprehensive plans,
This is
not with
legislative.
respect to any other applications.
Not legislative.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Julio? We're good?
I'm good.
Anybody want to make a motion or
I'll move it.
Second.
to approve as is without any deferral or so forth, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that we have a whole lot of wiggle room on this one.
We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
Any comment?
Not saying I agree with it necessarily, I just don't see,
Just making the motion.
I think it forces the vote and.
forces us to come to a decision, you know?
But not really, because
Your vote would be the same.
you may have five, all it does is, it's gonna go either with a negative or a recommendation of approval.
Yeah, but if I'm really in favor of it, and I really think it's a good, solid proposal, then it's incumbent upon me to
Convince one more guy,
It's one more
person.
vote. I mean, that's what this is all about, you know?
Yeah, and is it clear on everybody is that right now, and please, I need your help in this one more time.
Sure.
Right now, a 3-2 vote on a comprehensive plan change and recommendation, in my view, because it's a majority, to the city commission, is it being deemed to be a recommendation or not?
A denial.
Right, right now, without this change, it would be deemed to not be a recommendation. I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to make us all sit here until we come up with it. This
Right now, a 3-2
fixes the
is
problem.
like a deferral, essentially.
Well, it's not really a deferral. It's really violating the state law. State law requires this board to make a recommendation. So we are coming really into
line.
compliance with state law. So if you want to blame anything, it's the state law. The state law could have said, well, you don't have to make a recommendation, either denial or approval, you just make your comments. But that's not how the state law reads. It requires you to make a recommendation.
Right
So
now-
that's what's putting us in this box.
But right now, a 3-2 is a majority, and in my view, in many municipalities, it's a recommendation. What I'm trying to find out, if in the city of Coral Gables, legally, because of its statutes, a 3-2 vote right now, as it is without our vote, is a positive recommendation to the planning board, or is not? Right now.
Right now, under the city's code, 3-2 is not considered a recommendation by this board for any item. This board, for as long as I've been here, which is about 7 years, has always been a requirement of 4 votes. So it's unique to the city that is requiring this board to come up with 4 votes.
Right.
That's what it wants.
Hence, it's not the state, it's the city that is essentially creating this guideline.
True. You could have had,
If I'm hearing you correctly.
right, if the city code said, we'll allow recommendations on 3 votes, we wouldn't have this issue. But
And we would not be violating any state or
right, but because.
Federal law.
Because well, not federal law, state law, but because the board is required to have 4 votes
by the city of Coral Gables.
by the city of Coral Gables, this is how we have to fix it.
We have right now a motion and we have a
Yeah, but
second.
we need to discuss because some
But-
votes may be dependent on that. You know, look, I'm concerned that we may never get a 4th vote on something.
Correct.
That's
Now,
my
what-
concern.
If you want to, with your vote, suggest to the commission that on comprehensive plan items, the board should be allowed to make a recommendation based upon 3 votes, you can,
But then you're going against the state guidelines.
Oh,
no.
the city guidelines. That's what he just said.
I'm
This
just
is the
saying,
same-
if
by
you
the city.
want to, along with your vote, want to suggest to the board, let's change our city code and allow for 3 votes, that would fix it. But that changes the entire code with regard to this board.
In essence, this vote to make it 4 is to the comprehensive plan issue, which is different than other issues, which are four votes. This will be consistent now. It will be consistent now that the comprehensive plan is also requiring 4 votes. My grudge is with the city in position that you basically need a supermajority on everything. So that's another discussion for another time, but this is the way I'm reading.
And
what's
maybe you
happening.
want to bring this up as a separate issue the board can always recommend as a separate issue that you feel that this should be changed. That's your prerogative.
Do you want me to add an amendment to my motion saying that we highly request that the commission review the 3-2 vote for comprehensive plans from the Planning and Zoning Board?
I would, I don't know the rest of the
Someone
board.
wants to make that amendment, I might accept it to my motion.
You have a second from Vinnie.
We'll have to see the motion. Is that a motion you want?
I think you have to retract your motion and then.
No, we can just, you can amend.
Like, you
as
have
an
a friendly
amendment.
I just want to do it
But the
correctly.
motion, the person who made the motion and the seconder has to agree to the amendment.
Yeah, that would be
So all
the,
you're saying is that if there's only 5 folks here, the majority is 3, that's sufficient to say it's a.
Denial.
It's a.
According to what he's saying, it's
Well,
got to
he's
be
saying
4.
The proposal to the commission is, if we ever only have 5 people and 3 vote.
Yes,
your recommendation
that
is
would
to
be-
go.
not if
It
we
is a
have,
recommendation,
if we
even
have
though it's not
6,
4.
yeah, right.
And
in
that's
those
my,
instances.
and that's my concern. If you only have 5 and 3 of us says yes, it's going to go in as a denial. And it shouldn't go in as a denial.
I'm in agreement. And what I believe we were being told is an option is to put
I agree with you, except what I heard was that if that happens, he's going to tell you, guys, I'm sorry, we can't do that. And you're going to still have to do the same
And
thing.
we
with
could
them.
be here at 11 o'clock at
If-
night,
if-
and you're not going to convince me to change my
I
mind.
know that, but under both
and it's going 3 to 2 and it's
scenarios,
going to go as a
If the
denial.
if the code were to change, obviously the position would change. I'm not suggesting you suggest to amend the code. I'm saying some people are concerned that with a 3-2 vote, we would like to have a recommendation on the comp plan. Understand right now, you have 3-2 votes right now that go without a recommendation.
If anything, it would be keeping it this consistent, wouldn't it?
I would not go with the amendment.
I tried, he's just,
I know you did.
obstructionist.
So are you withdrawing your motion, or?
No, my motion, I'm still moving forward with it.
Okay, the way it is.
Yeah.
We have a
And
second.
if it passes, it passes. If not, it.
Any other discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
We have a motion by Withers and a second by Torrey.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Vinnie Torrey,
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yes.
Robert Behar,
No.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Avi Eisenstadt,
No.
Luis Revuelto, I'm sorry.
No.
So, there you go. We just talked about that for 30 minutes.
You just have the proof of the pudding,
Does
right?
that go forward with a recommendation or without a recommendation?
So was the vote tied?
Pass, right?
That just doesn't pass.
So the beauty of this is it's not a comp plan amendment, it's a legislative item, and it goes to the board without a recommendation.
That's right.
So it's coming back.
We'll hear about it
Okay.
pretty
I
soon.
kind of felt it was headed in that direction.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on. Item E5, please. Mr. Collin?
Yes. Item E5, we had asked for any public comment on that item, right? There was nobody.
There was nobody. I did
Right.
ask for E4. public
Item E5, an ordinance of the City Commission amending the City of Coral Gables zoning code, Article 15, notices, Section 15-104, quasi-judicial procedures, and amending 2-79 of Chapter 2, Article 3 of the City Code titled Order of Business to clarify definitions of documentary evidence and amend the order of presentation for quasi-judicial hearings, providing for a repealer provision, severability clause, codification, providing for an effective date. Item E5, public hearing.
Okay, so in our zoning code, there's an order of events for a quasi-judicial hearing. Right now, it states that the city staff presents first, and then second is the applicant. We've been given direction to switch that. So the applicant presents first, and city staff presents second. And so while we're cleaning up this order, we're also striking through some stuff and making it more generic. So instead of having public comment, for example, public comment in favor of the application and seconded by public comment in opposition of the application, we're just going to say public comment. And same with cross-examination. Instead of having city staff and then applicant, we're just going to have cross-examination. So we're just kind of simplifying that order.
Thank you. Julio? Any comment?
You want to open it to the public?
Yeah, sorry. Do we have anybody on this item from the
No.
public?
No, we don't.
From Zoom
No,
and from phone platform?
no.
I think at this time, I'll go ahead and close the floor, open it up for discussion. Julio did not have any discussion.
Again, the genesis of this change, it seems to me like this, I've always, I'm used to, and I think of the logic, city goes first, makes the presentation, and then after that, the applicant makes his presentation, and then you have opponents or objectors. Right now, you're gonna have the attorney or the
applicant go
client, the
first.
applicant making a presentation, the city makes a presentation, and then you have proponents and objectors. So you're kind of cutting to me, the sequence, but who is spearheading this effort? Staff?
I believe the Director of Development Services was given direction to have the applicant present first and then city staff. So to do that, we're just changing the order in the code.
I'd like to hear it from the rest of the board, but
Is there a reason why staff may be better off going first in terms of cleaning up or explaining things a little bit more generically or broadly?
And the intent
not-
might be that the applicant's presenting their project, kind of selling it, giving the overall vision of it, and staff follows up with actual technical issues and comments.
What I do like about it is that if the applicant says something that is not factual, maybe the staff could clarify that.
That's what I like also, is that the
That's
city
the-
can clarify or correct.
Not that the applicants don't always tell us what's correct, you know.
Good evening, Tsunami Cabrera, Development Services Director. So changing the order of the presentation was at the request of the city manager's office. And that's what this is taking care of, no? And it is because we would like to be able to clarify when we've had applicants that make it seem like the city is part of, they're selling the project to the, to the board members or to the commission. So we're trying to make it so that they're selling you the project, we're giving you our professional recommendation on the code. That's it.
Thank you for the clarification.
I want to ask you a question, though. Is that still allowed, though? You guys could come at the end of the presentation from the client and still do the cleanup?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah,
you
the
still-
chair can always have the power to call anybody up to
We as board
find anything.
As board
has
members
the
can.
right or to bring him back.
Right, but if there's things that are misstated or not properly explained, doesn't the staff always come back and try to do that anyway? I'm
the
just.
city has the right
Yes.
to rebuttal, right?
I mean, I'm not against what you guys are proposing, I just wanted to understand a little bit.
Chip?
When does the applicant have the chance to rebut in this procedure?
Well, I should add, there's a sentence at the very end that says this order of presentation may be modified by the agreement of all parties or by the chair. So the chair can always mix up things as he deems fit. But usually the rebuttal happens after staff or even after public comment. They usually reserve time.
So the sequence is the applicant?
The sequence proposed would be the applicant and then the city staff, and then public comment,
And then the
And then
public
rebuttal.
comments?
which is always
And
been
then we
after
open it up for public
presentations.
comment as standard. The only difference would be changing around the order that it starts.
And many times, the city just gives a 1 or 2 minute and they hand it over to the applicant anyway. I mean,
I'm okay with, I'm okay with this.
yeah, I'm not.
For me, I actually like the applicant to go first. I
I'll make
I was always used to the applicant going first.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Julio makes a second. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Luis Revolta,
Yes.
Benny Torre,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our regular order, which would be E1. Mr. Pollard, are you going to read E1 and E2 together into the record, or are you going to read E1 first?
Yep, I'm going to read both in, and we can have one hearing on both, and then we'll have a separate vote on each item
Okay,
with the chair's approval.
yes.
Okay. Item E1, a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving mixed-use site plan and conditional use review pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process Section 14-203, Conditional Uses for a proposed mixed-use project referred to as 4311 Ponce on the property legally described as lots 36 through 43, Block 5, Industrial Section 4311 and 4225 Ponce Leon Boulevard, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions providing for repeal of provisions, severability clause, providing for an effective date. Item E2, a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving remote parking and conditional use review pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14 Process, Section 14-203, conditional uses for proposed remote parking associated with the mixed-use project referred to as 4311 Ponce on property legally described as lots 36 through 43, Block 5, Industrial Section 4311 and 4225 Ponce Leon Boulevard, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions providing for repeal of provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E1 and E2, public hearing.
Thank you. Is the applicant here?
I was confused as to the process for a second. Good evening, board members, Mr. Chair. George Savaro with offices at 333 Southeast 2nd Avenue. I think Ray's going to be setting up, and I'll just give some kind of background as to the project before you and how we got here. With me this evening are the ownership group from 4225 Ponce Ventures. We have Mr. Eduardo Otaola, Alex Peters, Lester Garcia, and Jose Boschetti. We also have Ray Ford, our project architect from Arquitectonica, in the audience, in case there's any questions as well. I know the city has their own independent traffic consultant, but we have our project traffic consultant, Juan Espinosa, from David Plummer and Associates, and my colleague, Devin Vickers. We're very excited to be here before you this evening. We believe this is a great addition to the Merrick Park area. It's actually the first Class A office building has been proposed in Merrick Park in over 20 years. As many of you know, Merrick Park has experienced significant residential growth over the last years, and this is complementing the large high-end regional mall that anchors this area. But one component that has historically been missing is an office component to complement the residential and commercial uses that comprise this mixed-use area. And this district naturally lends itself to Class A office space. Companies that are in the market for Class A office space in the greater Miami area are looking for locations with amenity-rich and walkable mixed-use communities because it provides a better work-life balance, and it also includes all the shopping, dining, and housing options that employers need in order to attract and retain top talent, which is something that, when this design and innovation district was created for this area, is one of the things that we wanted to promote, which was attracting these large companies into this area, attracting more high-end retailers into the area. This area is also unique in that it allows employers to offer their workforce convenient access to alternative forms of public transportation. This is right across the street from the Coral Gables Trolley and only a short walk to the Miami-Dade County Metro Rail. I'll have Ray walk you through the site plan, but this project is proposing 65,000 square feet of office space. It has ground floor showroom or retail space, and it has an upper level story that has residential units and amenity space, and also an area that can in the future be converted for dining, to have rooftop dining, which is, in this area, you've had all of these quality award-winning restaurants that Merrick Park has become known for, so we wanted to provide that flexibility to continue in that trend. One unique aspect of the project, and I know that we've taken both items, E1 and E2 together, this project is taking advantage and utilizing the city's remote parking ordinance, which was adopted by the City Commission last year for this area. The intent was to take advantage of some of the surplus unused parking garages in the area, which this area is known for, and also to use the remote parking to reduce the height of the parking pedestal and create a much nicer, more beautiful design. And Ray will walk you through how we've accomplished that. With that, I'll let Ray walk you through the project, and our entire team is here to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ray Fort, project designer with Architectonica,
Could you state your address, please?
2900 Oak Avenue.
Thank you.
So here on the screen, we're looking at a location map with its orientation to the north. And the project site is located at the intersection of San Lorenzo and Ponce de Leon Boulevard. But the site is a unique position in the street grid because this is where San Lorenzo actually jogs and is not aligned as it crosses from east to west over Ponce de Leon Boulevard. And the western portion of San Lorenzo here is actually aligned with the entrance to Merrick Park. So we have wanted to take into consideration how the streets are misaligned and where the building is positioned because it is located at that entrance to Merrick Park, and it essentially provides a terminus to that location. Also, you'll notice that one of the garages associated with Merrick Park is located directly to the south of the site, and that's one of the locations for the off-site parking that'll be occurring in part for this building. So looking at some ground level context images, the site currently has a parking lot and a one-story retail building that is generally unimproved around the perimeter with some street trees along San Lorenzo. This is an aerial view showing the project, a couple of aerial views showing the project site. You can see in the image in the upper right the plaza of Merrick Park, and then San Lorenzo cutting across to the east and the project site highlighted in yellow. You'll also see that the metro rail is not too far away, and just to the east side of the site is the city of Miami. So there's a split in zoning that is occurring, and that area is generally zoned for about 24 stories. This is a massing that we put in place in the context, not a rendering, but just a massing that shows the context in terms of how tall the building is in relationship to its neighbors. And with respect to Merrick Park and the adjacent office building, it's certainly within the contextual size and scale of what we see in the area, with exception for the garage, because it has a much larger floor plate, and of course the department store, which is a much larger floor plate as well. This is another view of a massing looking from the south. One thing to note here is that the building really does provide a presence on that corner when going northbound from the circle of the Ponce de Leon. So we wanted to also take that into consideration in terms of how we place some of the ground floor activation and the design of the building in the upper floors. So just going through the plans quickly, the site dimensions are approximately 200 feet along Ponce de Leon and 100 feet along San Lorenzo. Just note these plans now north is oriented to the right of the page, and essentially to the top we'd be looking towards Merrick Park. What we see in the pink color is the showroom, the blue is the office lobby, and the gray are general MEP and back of house areas. We're proposing a paseo along the northern edge of the site, and this would essentially allow pedestrians to pass through the building along this side and essentially look towards Merrick Park. We also have a vehicular entrance from an existing curb cut at that location, which provides access to the garage ramp, which is located along parallel to Southwest 39th Avenue. We've also included a large apron or a waiting area for shared transit pickup and drop-off that would be very useful for office buildings of this type, especially with visitors and generally providing a level of comfort to get in and out of the building, as we find today with the use of shared transit, that there isn't generally enough queuing area and places for people to wait. The parking level is as efficient as we can get it. We've about 39 spaces per floor and about 87 spaces in total in the project, provided on site. The typical office floor steps back from the podium levels, 10 feet from Ponce de Leon, 15 feet from San Lorenzo, and 10 feet from San Lorenzo and 15 feet from the northern interior lot line. The project is generally defined by a center core with slightly deeper spaces to the west side. And we have a configuration here showing 4 different office suites, but it can be configured for 2, 4, or single tenant uses depending on its future use. The rooftop is very flexible in what it can be, but it accommodates residential units and amenity to the office building and potentially a restaurant that could occur on the rooftop with outdoor dining and indoor dining. Looking at this section of the building, you see here the showroom with office lobby on the ground floor, 2 levels of parking, 4 levels of office, and then the rooftop amenity floor with MEP located above that. In elevation, we're proposing a building that steps back from its podium height, and the lower floors are combined to feel like a lower scale project that addresses the pedestrian scale. We're going to be cladding the project in oolitic stone and having a textured louvered screening for the garage. Once we get to the upper floors, we're proposing a double height appearance for the windows with a walnut textured panel that is in between the floor slabs, but the proportions of the building are Mediterranean in nature, and because we have the 4 office floors above, this creates a really nice 2-to-1 ratio on the scale of those windows. Looking at the view from San Lorenzo looking back towards the east, this is essentially as though you are walking from Merrick Park. You can see the paseo and drop-off area located adjacent to the office lobby, the 2 levels of parking that are concealed with the extrusions in an overlapping manner to allow air to go through but block visibility into the garage. We're also proposing a split in the building, and I forgot to mention that in the plan. But on the typical office floors, we have a recess that can accommodate a terrace that can belong to any one of the associated tenant spaces. And that also provides relief in terms of the proportions of the building above the podium. On the rooftop, we're proposing a trellis system to cover some of the outdoor space. This is a view into the drop-off area with the lobby shown here on the right side of the image. And then this is a night view along Ponce Leon Boulevard looking back towards the building. And we're proposing a series of sconce lights at the ground floor to illuminate the pedestrian realm. And then once we get above the podium height, uplighting on the upper volume to give it more of a glow and dramatic effect, but not actually be able to see the light source itself. And that's the project. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Is the applicant done with the presentation?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. We're here to answer any questions that the board has. So we'll look forward to hearing more on your input on this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The city? Thank you.
Good. For now.
The PowerPoint, please. All right, so there's 2 requests for this. There's 2 requests. There's 2 conditional use requests for this. There's the mixed-use site plan as well as the remote parking request. So as you know, this location is on Ponce and San Lorenzo. And here's an aerial. You can see it's right next to the shops at Merrick Park on the edge of the city. It's existing conditions. Right now it's a parking lot with a couple of 1-story buildings. Remember, this is 2 requests. One is for the mixed-use site plan because they meet the threshold of 20,000 square feet to require a conditional use process, and the remote parking request is now a conditional use for new construction. So this is the site plan. As you went over, they're removing one of the existing curb cuts on Ponce Leon and adding in landscape there. They have the paseo on the north side. They have office lobby and the showroom on the ground floor. And this is kind of the data, right? So the open space, they're providing a little more than 2,500 square feet, which is 13% of the site. Some of that is provided in the right of way, that area that they're going to convert from the existing curb cut into landscape. The density, there's only 3 units. The height is 8 stories or 109 feet. And the FAR, they're just shy of the maximum at 3.48 FAR. And their parking spaces, they're locating 81 on-site, and the rest, 123 remote parking spaces, are going to be across the street. So the diagram that shows where the remote parking will be across the street on San Lorenzo with the Village of Merrick Park, and I'll go over the condition. They don't really have that lease obviously executed yet because it's not approved or under construction right now. So I'm going to go over that condition really quick once I get to it.
I'm sorry, can you back up a second on that?
Yes.
So those are distances from the
From the
remote
Metro
parking?
Rail, yeah, you can see on the very far right, the Metro Rail station.
And I see
And
that.
that's
Where's the remote
700
parking on there? Do they have the remote parking spots, places on that map?
The shared parking location just south, they're showing across the street. The street's 60 feet wide, so it should be 60 feet. I guess they're showing 380 feet to the center of Shops at Merrick Park.
There you go, okay. So it's 1,000 feet, is that what it is now?
Yes,
So
from property line to property
what's the difference
line.
between shared parking and remote parking? Is it the same thing?
No, so shared parking is within on-site, so within a building. So if you have mix of uses, like you have offices and retail and people living there, the idea is that people living there could also work there. So you're having a shared parking, not requiring as much parking. So remote parking is that you're providing some of your spaces remotely, off-site.
Right, so is there any remote parking on that map?
Yeah, so they're proposing remote parking across the street, or even part of the larger garage on Shops at Merrick Park.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm missing something here.
Commissioner, where you see shared
Could
parking,
you,
that's
could
where.
you state your name and
Kevin
position?
Kenny, I'm the parking director for the city of Coral Gables. Where it says shared parking on the map, that's where the remote parking
Oh,
is.
okay, so then, okay.
And what does it say? You got share parking for 3 units? How much share are you really getting?
I don't think they're actually proposing to have a shared use shared parking within their building, because that would say they only have 3 units. So yes, that is a typo. It should say remote parking location.
Our apologies for the confusion, George Navarro. So yeah, we're not using a shared parking.
Okay.
The residential is only a small component. It's supposed to be our remote parking location. So sorry about that.
Okay, continue, please.
Sorry about that.
No, it's a good catch. Did I have you zoom out so I can continue? Perfect. So we started with the DRC in March, and then the Board of Architects approved the design, and with Mediterranean bonus level 2 in May. They had a neighborhood meeting with the residents in the area in June, and here we are for Planning and Zoning Board. So there was letters sent out to property owners within 1,000 feet as required by the zoning code. And that was done 3 times for the neighborhood meeting, PZB, and for the commission. That will happen. A property posting and a website posting happened 3 times, and newspaper advertisement once. So staff determined that this is consistent with the comp plan and recommend approval with conditions for both the mixed-use site plan and also the remote parking. So the conditions of approval are pretty standard, but there are 4 that are very specific to this project. The first one is specifically about the remote parking application. So since they're not a project that's ready to go and under construction, have a finalized lease that's executed, because they have to go through the approvals and everything else. So we're having a condition that once they are ready to be issued a permit, then they have 2 options. They'll submit a survey, documentation of the spaces, the lease, which is required by the zoning code, and the 25% public benefit contribution, or they're going to have the same documentation, but they'll be using the city's spaces. The city owns or manages 400 spaces in the Shops at Merrick Park, so they'll lease those spaces from the city at a rate of $10,000 per space. So those are their 2 options for that remote parking.
$10,000 per space per, just one-time fee per space?
The $10,000 per space is a one-time fee to allow them to access to the 400 spaces that are for the public within the Village of Merrick Park. They will also pay a monthly permit fee for those spaces.
I just wanted that clarification because I didn't see that there. Okay, thank you.
And the second is a standard contribution of funds for that area, since the area is kind of lacking as far as open space. So we're requesting $120,000 for that open space contribution, but specifically to go towards Ponce de Leon.
But that goes to their requirement, right? They're
No.
required to
No,
have
this
the
would be
open-
beyond.
This is above the required
Correct,
altar
yes.
that they're going to do on the street?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it'll go into a fund that Public Works will eventually have a project and have funding to be able to fund something in that area. The third requirement is directly from Public Works as far as milling and resurfacing that portion of Ponce de Leon between San Lorenzo and the existing roundabout to the south. And then the fourth one is about traffic monitoring for 3 years, which is pretty standard for a lot of our projects. So I also have Irma's here, Public Works Director, for additional comments, additional conditions of
Good
approval.
evening. I'd like to add a few additional conditions to the record.
Could you just, for the
Hermes
record-
Diaz, Public Works Director.
Thank you.
So this project is expected to generate a maximum of 95 and 107 net new trips for the AM and peak PM periods for the adjacent roadway. And as such, we'll like to ask the developer to coordinate with the county and implement then subject to the approval of timing improvements at the intersection of Ponce and Bird and the intersection of Ponce and US 1. In addition to that, we ask that they prepare and present for review and approval a loading operation plan that ensures that service vehicles will not impact the adverse free movement of vehicles along Southwest 39th Avenue, and also a valet parking plan for the same purpose. And that's it.
Thank you.
That's it?
We're good. Before we, so the city's done with its presentation. Before we go ahead, do we have any speakers for this item?
No speakers?
No speakers in Zoom either?
No.
And none on the phone platform either?
No.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and close it for public comment. If I can ask you just a question. On Ponce and US 1 right now, we've got a new car dealership that's opening up. Have you taken into account the traffic or the stacking that will come in from US 1 or from Ponce with that car dealership going in there and people coming in for service and so forth?
That doesn't look a thing like that, does it?
Give me 1 second.
That's a different project.
But it's going to be right there.
Mr. Chairman, while he's waiting that, the other thing I'd like to get an indication from the applicant if he's in agreement with these additional public work conditions. So at some point in the process, we can get that concurrence.
I think the applicant asked. Does the applicant get the staff report before coming to this meeting?
Yes, they do.
So this is not the first time that they hear your conditions?
I believe Irma's discussed them with him today, with other conditions of approval. He's seen before.
Correct, yes. We reviewed this, and this was part of our final discussion. I would like to confirm that, yes, the Land Rover was included as part of their...
Traffic study.
Yes, it was.
Okay, and George, Mr. Collier went ahead and wanted to ask the question if you were in agreement with staff's recommendation?
So we've been working with staff. Obviously, this project's been in the making for a while. We are in general agreement with the conditions. I think some of the language and some of the things, as is typical, we're going to continue to discuss with staff throughout the time that it's presented here before you and the time it ultimately goes to City Commission. There's always conditions that get fine-tuned. I know there's some items on the traffic study that we're continuing to work through in terms of the language of the recommendations with the independent traffic consultant. So we'll continue to work on the exact language of those conditions as we get closer.
Mr. Collier,
Some of the concepts
is
are still
that
being ironed out.
satisfied?
Well,
right?
no, I'm confused, actually. So with regard to it seems like there were two conditions. One was intersection improvements. I'm sorry.
Coordinate with Miami-Dade County, timing of this section is obviously subject to the county's approval.
Okay, you don't have a problem with that, do you?
No.
No,
that
okay,
one.
and what was the other one?
The creation of operational plan for the loading and unloading and for the valet park.
You wouldn't have a problem with that?
We have no issues with
Okay.
those. Yeah.
All right.
So the conditions pertaining to the traffic study, we have no issues with. We spoke earlier.
Okay.
So that was
Thank you. Louis? No comment?
I have no.
Vinny?
I have one issue that I want to bring up. So you do have requirement to put $125,000 towards the open space, it's called. So I drive by Ponce every day, twice a day. I find it needing work. I do. So this is very positive. The thing that I worry about is that these dollars don't get spent for years and years. No fault of staff, but this is the way things work, right? You need 3 million, you only have 125. What would be needed on the street, and is there a way to get some of this stuff done earlier? Is this project going to increase traffic where we can slow it down or make some additional enhancements to the street because of this project? So those 125, can they get moved earlier?
So I'm glad you asked that question, and we haven't had a chance to discuss with staff on that comment, but generally, that's a condition that gets placed on some of the projects within this area. Our project went ahead and has proposed enhancements already along Ponce. So that was one item that I think, rather than in lieu of the payment, we've gone ahead and I can have Ray walk you through the site plan. We've proposed significant improvements along Ponce de Leon in terms of landscaping and pavers, which probably exceed the amount of the contribution. So that was one of the conditions that we wanted, as I said, work through with staff, because there are some other improvements that are being requested as well. And I think, like you said, these are improvements that are being made now as opposed to us not making them and just paying and not getting the immediate result. It's almost a contribution in lieu of the 125 because we're coming in and already making them.
I was thinking about that earlier. So if you were doing because right here, the beginning begins with this condition, right? The offsite 125. But then you get to the second page and it has the right-of-way realms that you're supposed to do, which is pave down the street and all that. So there's a value already tied to the second piece,
Right.
which you're saying sort of participates with the 125. So I was looking at that whole intermix of dollars.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's something we should be debating, negotiating, or is that something that gets negotiated at another location? I mean, is that ours to negotiate? Or is that?
I mean, the board is welcome to discuss that. The intent behind that was that segment of Ponce, which is, I think, about a couple blocks, maybe 3 blocks, it's kind of been neglected. And so instead of expecting some developer to pay for the entire segment, it's basically asking to see if there's different developments that can pay into that to be able to have a whole vision for that area, for that segment of Ponce de Leon.
So if you were to ask the director, what would be a vision for Ponce in the big scheme of things? What would be median? What would be the right approach for that whole street if you were to envision that as a global repair?
I think that area, maybe in relation to landscaping, the pavement actually, some areas may need to be some additional resurfacing, maybe some additional intersection.
But let me ask you a question, because
Sure.
to that point, does the city foresee doing a landscape medium down the middle of Ponce, like it is done from,
That is not something we're looking at the moment. It will create some potential loss of parking, so that's not something that we're really looking at the moment.
And my office is in that area,
Right.
and I don't think it would be a good idea to eliminate
Right,
so much parking,
right. No, absolutely.
especially on a project like this that is
Correct.
deficient in parking.
So no, that's not, to be frank, there is no Ponce project
But
at this
then how are you
location
going
at
to
the
spend
moment.
to answer your question, how are you going to spend the $125,000?
Actually, Hermes folks are doing some work now that's related to improvements for trolley stops and improvements or addition of stops. But you touched on probably the most important part between Bird Road and 4200 Ponce, those 3 blocks. Those spaces are slammed all day long.
All day long.
So we really can't afford to talk about anything that's going to take 30% of the parking spaces. But there are other improvements, planting trees in the sidewalk. There's a lot of things that are options. And there's other projects that are under construction now that will also add some funds for Public Works to do some improvements, but there is at least one project moving forward now that will include, benches and shelters for people riding the trolley.
My view of that is that it's somewhat unsafe. That street is an unsafe street to a large degree. People race through there. Anybody trying to cross is in peril of getting hit. It's really bad. I'm not sure there's a way to slow down traffic or control traffic in the way it runs through there, whether it's through some crossings that make people start to slow down. I don't know, maybe there's some cheaper way to start dealing with that. I'm not sure that's.
There is a crossing there already. Unfortunately, Ponce being a collector, a lot of your typical traffic calming thing is not really appropriate for that location. The county will never go along for that.
But there are some times of the day when I see a lot of kids from Coral Gables High School that cross there, because I drive through there quite a bit.
But you do have
also.
signalized intersection for those crosswalks. So, I mean, are they not crossing where they're supposed to? And maybe that's kind of, because sometimes it's also behavior, right? Because you do have a crosswalk.
You do have right in front of
the
this
building,
property, you have a crossing.
and you do have another one on Bird. So it's not that there's a lack of crosswalks on these blocks. So at some point, it's behavior, and there can be some further discussion about maybe the timing as far as pedestrians versus car, and all those things can probably be very easily added to the review for the county to look at further once you have all this new volume of people coming along. So, and one of the things that is become a standard practice now is we ask as developers, because, there's certain assumptions that are made when you do a traffic study, but the reality is that human behavior being what it is, for 3 years you'll do this traffic monitoring, and depending on what they find, then maybe there might be some additional improvements at that point that may be generated by those traffic studies. And when you actually have real data, what is the behavior that is actually driving? Because right now a lot of stuff is based on assumptions. So I think that covers a lot of our concerns. I will hope.
Is the 125 your recommendation, or?
No, 125. Look, I think there are multiple projects in that area. So I think ultimately the idea is that different projects hopefully will donate some money, and we'll figure it out once we have what's appropriate there. But to be honest with you, right now there is no plan for that area. Like, we don't have a schematic. We don't have, besides the projects that Director Keeney mentioned.
Where are they going to spend? Where is the city going to spend the $125,000?
At the moment, I couldn't tell you. I'm
This is
being
where
honest.
again, the only thing I see, this is a great building, and I think it's going to be a great enhancement. It's going to add a lot of life to the area, and behind it is another 2 or 3 projects coming up, that. So it's going to add movement. But if we're doing this great building, maybe some of those dollars should be actually activated and not put off till later.
You're saying spend now.
Yeah, I with this project should be the most we can do on the street, whatever that means, but should come sooner than later.
Is there any view of redoing Ponce Circle, Ponce from Bird to this location, or is not even envisioned?
That's a heck of a lot more than $125,000.
So I understand, but if there is a plan.
There is no plan at the moment.
Because if you look at that street, that's probably one of the ugliest streets in Coral Gables.
How do you really feel about it?
What do you really feel, Julio?
But it's really, there's no landscaping, there's no good sidewalks.
Well, there are some palm trees.
Right, and those are things that can definitely be looked at, but remember, they're competing needs, right? You want wider sidewalks and you want more landscaping, the parking is gonna lose, and obviously we don't wanna lose parking. So I think there's certainly ways to improve upon it.
Actually,
but
that's angle parking.
Yes.
And something could be done to be able to incorporate some bump outs.
Correct, and that's what I'm talking about.
And I would, and if we, depending on what happens here, I would make a recommendation that $125,000 is used in that immediate area to benefit the project and to benefit that whole, Ponce area of, the corridor.
And I think you can make that your recommendation.
Right, and just, again, the intent of this was to join the funds of, I think, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other projects in the area, to combine with those kind of contributions, to be able to make a project that's on Ponce, or wherever the city deems, appropriate.
Vinny? Any
No, I think that's my point. I think the project is fine, and I think I do like the project, and I think it's going to be a great enhancement to the area. I think the streetscape is where this needs to start going into now, and I think the city should start to move that project of Ponce. It is one of our greatest streets, but it's just like Julio said, it's not the most attractive. And again, and the speed and the people going through there it needs a little bit of work.
I'm an engineer. We love concrete and asphalt. I don't know what you're thinking.
Well, Greco's getting fixed. That's good.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Chip?
Is the showroom a retail space?
Kind of.
No, I'm just curious. I like the shops along there, and so I
Right.
kind of, and where's the restaurant?
So part of the vision for the Design Innovation District was to have a lot of showrooms on the ground floor.
A showroom of what?
Showroom of furniture, of,
So it's going to be a retail shop?
So right now, we're in the conditional use site plan approval. This is the concept. The concept is to bring, I don't know if you've seen that area of Ponce now, they have like the high-end kitchen cabinets, the high-end lighting. So bring in some showroom to complement that area. What the ultimate end user is not, we're
So
not
it's
sure
going to be a
yet.
retail
Retail
function,
or showroom,
function.
yeah.
Is there going to be a restaurant?
So our idea is, and we don't have any interest yet at this moment, but we've designed it in a way that in the future, if there is interest, because there's a lot of marquee restaurateurs that want to come to this area, we could convert a portion of the rooftop into a dining restaurant. Obviously, we'll have to comply with parking and FAR, but that concept has been built in there to provide that flexibility.
So
I
the
think it's
9
something-
tables I see on the sidewalk, people aren't really eating there, that's just the rendering?
On the rooftop?
No, on the street level. It shows no
With the
parking.
umbrellas.
It shows no parking, so you don't have to worry about your bump outs.
With
And it
umbrellas.
shows, let me count them again, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a great place to dine, I'm just wondering where the restaurant's.
He's talking about the cover sheet.
Oh, no. No, the rooftop restaurant, the dining use, if we're going to have it, it's going to be on the rooftop.
No, I know, but the dining on the ground level.
Yeah, you do show
You show a lot
umbrellas.
of people eating on the ground level. So that's why I was wondering if your intention is to take that retail space and eventually convert it to a restaurant. And if they do, what does that do to the parking requirement?
We'll have to provide additional parking.
Through remote parking?
Yeah, through remote parking. Or we'll have to work on the flexibility of uses to get the numbers to match, to be able to
So
comply with
there's no decision to make that a restaurant. That's not going to be the.
Not as of right now. I mean, there's flexibility. It's either, no one knows what's going into the ground floor. We know the ground floor has to be commercial because per your comp plan, you have to provide a minimum number of retail and commercial use. So we know it's going to be commercial. It's not going to be like some amenity space, but what the ultimate end user is going to be, we don't know. I can tell you if a Michelin star restaurant comes and wants to lease that space, then I would expect for it to be a restaurant. One of the nice things about this area is from a parking perspective, obviously we'll have to mitigate it through additional offsite spaces, but when I go to Merrick Park, I park in the parking garage, I walk through the mall, I walk around, right? Go check out the little park with the fountains, and then, usually it's a walkable area, so.
So my
it
point
wouldn't be
is,
out of
I
context
really
for
like that whole street feel where you can walk and you can buy cabinets, you can buy tile, you can buy, and I like the idea of a showroom there, a really cool showroom. Once you start converting it into restaurants, I don't know if that whole street would turn into a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we've designed it to be a showroom. If you even look at the way it's laid out,
I
it's
see it.
intended to be, now whether that gets split in half and you get some other retail, it's difficult to tell. I mean, the market right now is changing, month to month. So we'll see where it's at. But I mean,
Can I have the city attorney maybe translate what you just told me the past 5 minutes?
yeah, it's going to be commercial. What the ultimate end user is
Okay,
going to be,
I
it's hard to
got it.
gauge. What we're intending, I could tell you, is ground floor retail or showroom, and the restaurant being at the upper level. That's currently what our vision is.
I mean, you did a great job with the back of house as far as the offloading and whatever it's set up for a retail display showroom space.
Correct. Yeah, so the code does not require for us to have a loading area. We've incorporated the loading area on purpose in order to be able to serve
The showroom.
the showroom, or in the event that we have an upper level restaurant, when there's food deliveries, we can move them upstairs.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Anything further, Chip?
No, I'm good.
Julio?
No, I think it's a good project. It's a good building.
Thank you. Robert?
I have three things. One, doesn't have, really is not your doing, but you're putting residential on the top floor to comply with the 85% maximum of office and the rest of, for a mixed use. I think that we as a board should revisit that because we're forcing them to do some residential that makes absolutely no sense. That should be a commercial space, should be the office, should be something other than 3 units just to comply with that
Now,
requirement.
in this particular situation, it's unique because that happens in all the projects, and that is correct. We have an end user that's an international financial company that is going to be moving in. They have high-end executives that come in and fly in. So in this particular situation, they'll actually be used, but
If you're gonna convert, you possibly could convert it to a restaurant later, there's no use for it. So I don't know if there's a way that, one, we need to look at that code and try to fix that 85% required maximum of the same use. That's one of them. It may not apply here, and I don't know if we could make a recommendation to eliminate, and Mr. Collier, you're the one that, can we make a recommendation not to abide by the 85% maximum for one use? Or is that not permitted?
Well, I think the only thing you could do is recommend that the board, because I believe that 85%, is that a comp plan or is that's the comp plan, right?
Yes.
So you could make a recommendation for the commission to revisit this comp plan element.
Okay, so that would be for something else, not this project. Okay, that's for another day. I like the project. I'm in support of the project. I think will be a great asset to that area because, I walk there. My office is literally 500 feet or less from this location. So I like the project. I'm a bit concerned that we're asking for 123 remote spaces, and we don't have a lease in place yet. So I will approve it with the condition that before the CO, there has to be a lease in place because that's a big deficiency. From the 204, we're providing 81. So I want to make sure that's in place.
So
And
just
the
to
third-
just to clarify, that condition plays before they're issued a building permit, so very early on in their process.
Even better, even better. And the third, you say that there was 3 notices that were sent out to the adjacent within 1,000 feet of the site. Who sends those notices out? Is it the applicant or is it the city?
The applicant does.
I could tell you,
You didn't
not
get a notice?
one, not two, not three, never got one single notice. And I own the space, so I am a property owner. It's not like I'm leasing. Never got any notices. I'm in support of the project, but just for the record, that's never sent out.
Yeah, we use
Your business, so it's condominiumized, that building that you're in, and you're an owner?
Yes. I'm a property owner by Miami-Dade County. They collect my taxes, so I am a property owner. Never received any notices.
Yeah, so we use one of those certified, companies that certifies the radius and everything. We'll check the list.
Listen, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it would have been good for me to go there before just to give you a hard time. But
No, but we'll double check the list. We use the same company that everybody uses for that. So I don't know what the issue was, but.
You answered the question for the apartments, because I was actually going to ask, why are there 3 apartments on top? It just doesn't make sense in a project like this to me. The other question that you answered also was 123 remote spaces. That was already answered. I would definitely want you to have an agreement in place. But the question that I have is, as projects start to build in this area where they're allowed to use shared parking, what does the city have in place to know how many spaces are getting filled and what's left or what's available for future projects? What mechanism?
Well, there's often confusion between shared parking versus remote parking. The shared parking component will only come into play when it is shops at Merrick Park, because they will have to present to us, the parking studies in their facilities that show that because of traffic levels, they have capacity to do some kind of addition or change in use.
These were all labeled shared parking.
Yes.
But I think
What's happening here is remote parking,
Okay.
which is, there's two ways this can happen. One is there's a parking study by Village of Merrick Park, and they show in their share of the 3,500 spaces, they have capacity to lease to this developer the 123 spaces. We would review that shared parking study that shows that Village of Merrick Park has capacity to lease them spaces. There's an entirely separate possibility in that in the development of the shops at Merrick Park 20 years ago, roughly, they were required to build in excess of their parking requirement 400 spaces. Those are spaces that can be used for what the city deems appropriate.
Okay.
That's why, in this case, the developer is talking about paying the city $10,000 per space for access to those 400 spaces.
Plus a monthly fee.
And yes, the monthly fee is anybody who parks monthly in Village Merrick Park pays a permit fee. So we would keep track. And at that point, when we say, our 400 spaces are done, then those would no longer be available for the infill development in the technology district.
Okay.
That does not preclude from Village of Merrick Park, if parking conditions change and the utilization of their 3,200 spaces, lessens, then they could come in and show us that they have capacity for additional shared parking development.
And you go ahead and it's monitored, for example, is the agreement done on a yearly basis? And then if it's renewed after a year, it goes through your department?
So for the 400 spaces, we would give permission to use part of our 400 spaces for essentially the extent of the lease the city has with Shops at Merrick Park, which is still 70 years or some number like that. If it was Village of Merrick Park, what we would do is we would review the shared use study, traffic study that they would do. And there may be, if there was a large developer that was using 100 spaces from Village of Merrick Park, there may be some requirement in that agreement that requires an annual review. But at this point, the only project that we've looked at that would be a shared use project is the one on Aurora? Laguna, at the 4200 block of Laguna, which was going to at one time be a hotel. But that project is now going to be something different.
So if they don't use other than the 400 spaces, how do you monitor when they don't use the city's 400 spaces? Let's say they go and use other spaces.
If they don't use the city's 400 spaces and they're doing a straight agreement with Shops at Merrick Park, there's a couple of things that happen. One is the major retail tenants in Shops at Merrick Park essentially have veto power. So if they don't like the deal, they get to vote. We monitor it because we require the parking and traffic study to be done by an independent.
But how do you monitor it? Do you monitor it on a yearly basis? Do you monitor it on a
Well, until the
biannual?
first one happens, there is no real mechanism. But once the first one happens, we would put into that agreement
So there should be some kind of mechanism. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
But if you don't monitor every year, let's say that you do it the first time, and after the 1 year, they may not renew that lease, what happens then? No?
At that point, in the zoning code, there are several requirements. I'm not an
Because this is not just for this project, but any other project. Here, I could say I'm gonna lease 123 spaces the first year, I get my permit, and after the first year, I don't.
Go.
Yeah.
You know, and then how do the city monitors those
Well, it's not
agreements?
really the issue of monitoring. How do we enforce?
How do you enforce it? Correct.
And there are provisions in the zoning code about the enforcement, but that's not really my area.
Because we cannot put a condition that lease for those spaces has to be for 25 years, right?
25 years would probably be excessive, but I
this office-
believe in negotiating, it's a conditional use, so there can be
Kevin, this
reasonable
office building is going to be around for the next 50 years. or
I
more.
understand. That's why I mentioned when we're talking about our 400 spaces, the agreement from the city would essentially be for the remainder of the term of our agreement with Shops at Merrick Park.
And how long is that, say it again?
I think
75
we have
years
like
or
70 years left.
I remember that when it was done.
I was just going to clarify, because to Mr. Behar's comments, the issue that you're raising, because I had the privilege of working on this remote parking ordinance when it was going through for another project I was working on at the time, Commissioner Mena raised the same concerns as to what happens in the event that the lease expires and how do you monitor it. So one of the things is that there's a covenant, and I believe there's an annual recertification, an affidavit that you submit to make sure that it's there. Something else that's required as part of the condition here is that when we do submit the lease, we have a mediation plan. So a mitigation plan in the event that the lease expires, what do? You could either submit a new lease for an alternate offsite location that meets the criteria of 1,000 feet. You could propose to provide parking in some alternative format. One of the other options is that as part of the mediation, the code actually allows you to pay down your parking entirely. So in the event that we have a lease down the line that we're not able to renew, Chapter 74 of the code allows you, one of the mitigation options is to make a full payment to the city. And the intent of that, I think, was to basically have money available to make sure that the parking facilities in the area are either being built or the ones that are surplus but maybe old are being maintained by the city and upgraded. So there is an option that you would have to pay for all the spaces that you're short.
But I think, for me at least, my concern was, how does the city monitor that you comply with constantly having that parking agreement and are using it?
Yeah, I think it's that covenant that requires, as part of one of the covenant provisions, it requires annually for the applicant to submit an affidavit confirming that the facts have not changed
So
since the time of the original approval.
So the applicant has to submit an annual affidavit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and also we'll provide the city with a copy of the lease, and I'm sure they have their own way, Kevin has his own way of documenting when that lease term is up and could follow up to. But the applicant does have an affirmative obligation to.
Also, on the $125,000, you know, I'm in the same line as Vinny and Robert, that money should be spent in that area somehow. I understand putting the money in the coffer and building it up to do a project down the road could add value. But I think there's an immediate need for that area right now to improve it. So I would be in favor of, I don't know if it's something within our recommendation, but it'd be something.
I think so. I think we can make that recommendation.
I would be in favor of that. The other questions that I had have actually been answered on this. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move it for approval with the recommendation that the 125 gets brought forth early and be part of this project's enhancement to the street.
And Robert had a motion to take a look at that 3 units, the apartments. Is that a recommendation that can be made at this time for the commission to look into that?
I mean, let me ask the applicant, is something that you would want us to make that recommendation if there's an opportunity to not to have to do those 3 units?
I mean, I think it's something that gives us flexibility. I know overall, yes, that's something that I think needs to be looked at because there's a gap between 8% and 85%. There's a 7% gap that.
Of course, the problem with that is there'd be a comp plan amendment.
Yes.
He has any interest in moving this along.
I don't think it's going to be for this project, but I think in general,
Maybe something for us as a separate.
So
Yeah.
we'll withdraw.
I think we're fine as is with this.
By the
but-
way, I think, to Chip's, I think that a restaurant in that ground floor, I like the idea that having those tables, that could be a great, I will use it a lot.
so we have,
They're in the picture.
He doesn't want it.
we have a motion by Vinnie.
Okay.
We have a motion by Vinnie.
I'll second it.
Robert went ahead and second.
So just clear on the conditions. So we have the additional conditions of the Public Works Department, which the applicant has expressly said he doesn't have a problem with. The $125,000, I think, should be considered as a separate voluntary covenant by the applicant.
But I think the condition is that Vinny put is
To be
that
proffered.
to be used in that area, right? And I agree with that.
Well, that could be part of the recommendation, that it should be, money should be used in the area.
That area is in the Design and Innovation District.
on
Or
the-
that
on the-
area is on that block.
On Ponce corridor, let's say. or
Within
some-
those 3 blocks.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the recommendation.
Yes, sir.
And we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, so that goes, that would be appropriate for item E1.
Correct. We're going to do
So
one at a time.
we're doing item E1 first.
That is correct. Any discussion? Nope. Call the roll, please.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Good project, like it, yes.
Benny Torrey,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Oh, we have the
we're
second
not
item,
done
that's
yet.
right.
You could go if you want to.
I'm going to stay just in case.
I have one question for
only
Mr.
halfway there.
Navarro.
I will.
You described the restaurants in the area as quaggy? What was the word you used? I'm not familiar.
Award-winning and
You used,
Michelin star.
no, but there was another word that I heard, quaggy, that I really was looking forward, Mr. Navarro, to clear that up.
I frequented all the restaurants in the area,
Thank
so I'm
you.
quite
I'm going to
familiar.
look up quaggy. I think it's a
If you need a
very,
recommendation, let me
I'm going to
know.
use that in my next
So
presentation.
item E2,
Motion to approve E2, which is the remote parking option.
okay. Is there anything that we would like to look at as far as monitoring or anything like that, or good as it is for you, Vinnie?
I would leave it to the
Parking director?
parking director and the
staff.
ordinances that exist, which I think are in place. So,
We have a
And
motion.
just to be clear, you have to demonstrate a lease at building permit, correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, prior to the issuance of a building permit,
Your covenant, your,
or comply with, the other,
I'll
under
second
that
it.
condition. There's different mechanisms for compliance.
okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Put that in place. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Benny Torrey,
yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm going to stick around in case there's a motion to reconsider.
This item's,
I need to take.
Thank you all.
Let's go ahead and
We're gonna
take
take a
a
5-minute
5-minute or so
5-minute break.
to have the next applicant set up.
I need 5 minutes.
Arquitectonica, behind Green Street, which is.
Yeah.
right, let's go ahead and,
At any rate,
let's go ahead and get started, please. The next item that we have on the agenda is item E3.
Item E3, a resolution of the City Commission approving receipt of transfer of development rights, TDRs pursuant to zoning code, Article 14, process, section 14-204.6, review and approval of use of TDRs on receiver sites for the receipt and use of TDRs for a mixed-use project referred to as 1505 Ponce on the property legally described as lots 1 through 6 and lots 17 through 22, block 36, Douglas section, 1505 Ponce de Leon Boulevard, 126 and 122 Menoras Avenue, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions, providing for a repeal of provisions, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E3, public hearing.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue, here today representing Location Acquisitions, LLC, the contract purchaser of the property located at 1505 Ponce de Leon Boulevard. I'm joined today by Mr. Hamed Rodriguez, our project architect, as well as Leonard Roberts with Location Acquisitions. This board actually previously recommended approval of this project in May of this year, and it was subsequently approved by the City Commission in July of this year. Both approvals were conditioned upon identifying and obtaining approval for the transfer of floor area from TDR sending sites to the project site located at 1505 Ponce de Leon Boulevard. That is exactly what we are back and discussing today, the TDR receiver site approval for 1505 Ponce. As you will remember, there is a lot to like about this project. It is less than half of the maximum permitted density. 80 units are proposed versus 179 units, which would typically be permitted. Almost a third of the project site is open space. And there are 2 public parks proposed for this project, one fronting Ponce and on the west side of the property and another on the east side of the property.
May I interrupt you for 1 second? You say that you came before us and we approved this project already, right?
Correct.
And this is just the formality to get the TDRs?
Correct.
Okay, just to clear that.
Thank you.
what we see is what we get.
Pretty much, yeah. We're also preserving and adapting a historic building that's located on the property at 122 Menoras. Part of this project and part of the TDR approval are even more additional public benefits, because where we are getting the TDRs from, in one case is a project that we will be conveying, or property will be conveying to the city for a park at 301 Mallorca. And then the 3 other sender sites involved will be providing TDRs from historic properties, which will then help with the maintenance of those historic properties. We have our project architect here. We could potentially go through the plans if you wanted to again, but you've seen it before, with the exception maybe of the new board member. We're available here for any comments or questions that you might have.
Thank you. Does staff have a presentation for this? Or not?
No.
I do, it's very brief.
Thank you.
You want me to give it?
Please.
Okay.
Of course we want
I think we heard the
Absolutely, we can't wait.
it's just going to take another half an hour,
No,
Robert.
she's not. It's quick.
Hold on. All right, so this was approved back in July of this year, and part of that approval was requiring them to come back within 6 months with TDRs. So here we are approving those TDRs. So they're getting them from 3 different historic properties, including 3 historic properties and then a future city park. Now this, you may not be aware of this or remember this, but there was a text amendment that was done, I think, back in 2019, that you can get TDRs from a future park. From a future park. So if you have vacant land, or if you just have property and you take out the house or whatever it is, you can transfer those development rights to another project that can receive them. So they're using one that's at 301 Majorca. So that I think is new to you guys, because I didn't go through planning. It goes through the Parks and Advisory Board and then to the Commission for approval. So the location of it is on Ponce, in between Menoras and Mendoza. That's zoned appropriately, mixed use and commercial.
And this has already been approved, the project.
Right, yes, right. So this is the context, so you can see the mass of the building with the existing context in the area. So we sent out letters to the property owners, and I hope they all got them. Looking at you, Robert. As well as postings and website posting and newspaper advertisements. This is the radius. And staff recommends approval with no conditions this time.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Jill, do we have anybody from the public? Anybody
Sorry, no.
from Zoom?
No,
Anybody on the phone platform?
no.
At this time, I'd like to go ahead and close it for public comment.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a,
How about this question, Robert?
You did.
I have a few questions.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think
I am
Louis,
actu-
please.
I am actually trying to give Mr. Beher a hard time about this, but I don't have any questions.
yep, and does
Did
anybody
we,
on the board have any questions?
I
Chip?
have a question. Sorry.
That's okay.
Moving on by 8, though. Is this seconded, or are we having discussion after the second? Are you waiting for a second to your motion?
Well, let's go ahead and,
Okay, so how many TDRs did they need, and how many are they getting from the park, and how many are they getting from the historic building?
Yes, I have that here.
59,000,
You have the number?
about 59,000.
Yes, 59,405.
From, how's that broken down, do you know?
Yes, 24,000 from 235 Majorca, 24,000 and some change. 3,200 from 118 Menottes, 30,000 from that park that I mentioned at 301 Majorca, and then about 1,500 from 36.
Okay,
Venetian.
so we've upzoned that area.
We changed the maximum FAR that you can have in that FAR,
Okay,
yes.
so are they benefiting, is the historic building that they're getting the TDRs from, benefiting from the upzoning that we previously did?
Yes, yeah. Because instead
But
of
they took their
1.9
property-
FAR, now they can have 2.5 like everybody else.
But does that give them more TDRs?
Yes.
I thought
Because
we
the
just- I thought
potential,
Benny- I thought
the
Benny
potential
brought
of that
up.
property, of that historic property was raised. So instead
So-
of 1.9 for a small property, it's now 2.5, so it's the same for all sizes of MF2 properties.
So if I have a piece of property with a historic building on it, and I'm doing a planned area development, or however I do it, if I upzone the whole property, including the historic building I'm on, then I can sell to myself my own air
Oh,
rights?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Okay, okay.
You're talking about the historic property
Yeah,
on
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah,
property.
yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
I'm so
I just
sorry.
see a
I thought
conflict
you meant the zoning code update
Okay.
and how, okay,
Okay.
my apologies.
Okay, okay,
We're on the same page now.
okay.
So that, yes, but they're not really sending the TDRs from that property because it's already part of their building site.
Okay,
But yes, they did gain some square feet because it was now no longer 2.5, it's 3.5.
But this
Because
is
it was
a
rezoned
PAD.
to mixed use.
They did a
I understand,
PAD.
I get it now. I understand now. I was confused.
So
I got it.
just to be clear,
I understand it.
on a piece of their assemblage, there's a historical property.
Right.
That piece that piece got changed to higher density. That still has a historical, but they used all those new.
Yeah, they incorporated the leftover
Right, but
square
they still
feet,
kept-
like,
okay, so
into their
they-
building.
Yeah, but it just seems kind of, they
But that's not a TDR.
didn't have to buy anything, they just kind of switched
But
it.
it's nothing to do
but
with
that's not a
TDRs.
TDR.
That
They're
was-
not transferring, they're using that in their
I
site.
understand. I
The
understand.
adjacent-
So it's really not a TDR technically, it's almost like a planned area development.
The three properties that they identified plus the park are the TDRs they're transferring.
I get it.
Correct.
I get it. I get it. I get it.
Julio, any comments?
So did we check if there was anybody in the public or?
We
did that?
we
Okay.
went through that.
So we have a motion, I don't think we have a second.
We have a motion by Robert to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a second.
This is in accordance with department recommendations.
Yes.
In
Condition.
accordance with the recommendations as stated.
Mario gone?
Any comments? No? Jill, call the roll, please.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes,
Benny Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Have a very good night.
Thank you very much for coming.
Mr. Chair, I had one small question, or not question, just advice. So we're changing the meeting from November 3rd. I know last meeting we talked about November 3rd. pertaining to the November 1st, there's some time-sensitive text amendments that need to go to the commission the following week. So we need to have it on a Tuesday instead of Thursday of that week. Is that okay with the board?
Instead of Wednesday, Tuesday.
Instead of Thursday, we agreed on November
Okay,
3rd
okay.
before,
Okay.
So we're moving it back to,
the 1st.
So the original date was November 9th, but that date is being used by the commission. We, at the last meeting, settled for November 3rd. However, we need to change it to November 1st.
Okay.
are you going to send out a change?
Yes, of course I will.
May not be here. I don't know.
Hey, okay. Can I add, just for the good of the business? So I just want to tell you all that after we had that discussion about the tree-lined streets, I don't know if you've been very much aware, driving around and noticing how many broad, open streets we have without plantings in the right-of-way. Have you noticed that? Okay.
I have.
Were you here? You weren't here, were you?
I was,
I'm probably not going to be here myself. I'm going to be out of town for the November 1st. So is everybody okay with doing November 1st? Everybody else going to be here? Okay.
I got to check tomorrow, but should be. Can, before we adjourn, can we put a recommendation that staff looks at fixing that 8%, 15%, 85%? Because right now, if you look at it, you require 85% of maximum for one use, then 8% of commercial. Then what happens to the other 7%? There is a, so I think in a project like this today, it makes absolutely no sense to have residential units just to comply with that.
Good evening, Arceli Rudila, zoning administrator. But even if they convert that unit into commercial, they would still meet the requirements of the 85%. It's not because that they're trying to meet the 85 and 8%.
I don't think your issues with this project, your issues
in
generic.
In general, because you got to do the mixes.
Yeah, the only difference with that one, if they're going to convert that residential unit, because the parking requirement for residential would be per unit, right? So one unit, one parking space. If we're going to convert that into a commercial, it would be 1 per 300 square feet. So
Yeah, they're going to have to provide more parking, but in general, as a whole, I think this is something that for years, I know I had the conversation. There's a missing gap there between the 85 that, for one use, then 8% commercial. What happens to the other 7%? We don't, and in some cases, it may not, needs to be a mixed use, but they need the benefits of that. That's something that I think we need to look at. And if it's a comp plan modification, right?
Right.
I think we should look at it really good.
Yeah, we can take a look at that, but the intent really is not that you have to sum up 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
But okay, let me ask you, if I got to do minimum of 8% commercial on the ground floor, and I just want to provide my minimum because I'm in an area that commercial doesn't work, and I'm only allowed to do a maximum of 85%, let's say, of residential. The other 7%, what do I do with it?
Or that you have commercial on the ground, you have office, and then residential. I think that was the intent.
But why do you have to do residential at all? Why can't you do 15% commercial?
But it may be a project that you can only do 8% on the ground floor. Are you gonna force me to do 7% of office in a residential
But here's
building?
the point, how do you get around having it be mixed use if you don't have two uses?
Well, the whole intention was to bring people downtown originally with the mixed use.
Work, live,
It's the urban infill with more residents.
to work. And
But they're saying
And I think the 8% on the ground floor makes sense, but
well, leaving that piece aside, they're saying if you have 100% of a project that is mixed, we don't want you to do more than 85 of this type, right? So no matter what, you got to provide me 15 of something else.
Yeah, you have to provide that distribution of uses in order to achieve that mixed uses. So no more than 85%. So most of the time, what happens is that you have commercial on the ground, and then the rest of is residential. So we wanted to avoid that. What if you are going to do? A lot of it also is that even the ground floor is difficult enough to find for that retail 8%.
It's difficult enough.
It is. I fought this several times.
Yeah, so that's why we would like to at least have that distribution, like you provide an office perhaps.
But
Live work now is.
But see, I did a project that we had the 8%, and it was very difficult to even to get to the 8%. I had to put in some offices on the upper level that makes absolutely no sense, because 7% of office in a building that, you know, that is mainly residential is so little that it's.
But then it's
We
not
can take a look at that, and we can take
Try to
a.
get multiple uses to happen in the downtown or whatever it is, right? So I guess if you're not following the rules of trying to mix the use, and you're having difficulties because you're trying to do a residential building more than you are anything
But you
else.
know what, it may be that 85%, or on a mixed-use building, you have to comply with 8% on the ground floor. But you're not limited to an 85%.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a suggestion, because you all may want to come up with a resolution or something to recommend, I think we should list this as a discussion item on an agenda, so that we've got it on the agenda, we have a discussion, and then the board.
And we have public input on it.
That's a good
Right.
idea. That's a good idea.
I think that's a better way to go than trying to, I recognize it's a result of a particular item tonight, but I think it would be cleaner if we did it as a discussion, board discussion item.
Maybe staff can look at putting that when we don't have a lot
And it's an
of
important
money.
discussion because that 8% on the ground floor is a difficult thing, but I think you have to understand where is important. I fought for certain things to be activated to a high degree versus just having commercial for the sake of commercial. Otherwise, you know, if the streetscapes don't work, we got a problem. You know, it's just continuing to make boring
And in
cities.
some places, 8% may be okay. In some places, may be too much. And then to top it off is the other 7%, what do I do with it? I have to create a use that is going to be empty in a
Look, I agree
building.
with you. There's areas where you see these commercials on the downstairs and they never lease. And they never lease ever, and they're disasters. And I see them on Lejeune, I see them on many places that you go, why is that even there? But I think that's a discussion where should it be approved? What conditions apply where they should definitely happen versus ones that are not so important? So those discussions, we can maybe.
In some cases, what has helped is that you could do live work units as part of your 8% of the commercial,
Yeah, live work unit is part of the 8% commercial.
right? So that helps achieve, you know, to that 8%. My thing is like to get to the 15%, the additional 7%, where and what do I need to, you know? So I agree, let's not, today is just a conversation, let's bring it up
Okay.
on another day.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Motion second? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.